The night sky erupted with blinding light as something crashed through Earth's atmosphere. I wasn't supposed to be there, just a regular guy taking a shortcut through the woods after my late shift at the hospital. But sometimes, fate has other plans that I remember freezing in place as the ground shook beneath my feet. Whatever had fallen wasn't far away, and every instinct told me to run. But curiosity has always been my weakness. 20 minutes of cautious hiking led me to a scene I still struggle to describe, a smoldering crater with twisted metal unlike anything I'd ever seen, and in its center, a figure that changed everything I thought I knew about the universe. She looked almost human, almost. Her skin had an iridescent quality that seemed to shift colors with each labored breath. Delicate, geometric patterns traced her temples and disappeared beneath clothing that resembled liquid metal. But what caught my attention most was the deep gash across her abdomen, leaking a silvery substance that definitely wasn't blood. "Stay back." Her voice materialized directly in my mind, bypassing my ears entirely. "Your atmosphere is poisonous to me." I should have listened. Should have called the authorities or simply walked away. But 7 years as an ER nurse had hardened my resolve against others' pain. "You're hurt," I said, pulling my medical kit from my backpack. "Never leave home without it. I can help." Her eyes, violet with vertical pupils, widened in what I could only interpret as fear. "Impossible. Your kind cannot touch me without consequence." Something about her phrasing sent chills down my spine, but I continued unpacking gauze and antiseptic. "Well, your kind is bleeding out in a forest on my planet, so let's worry about consequences later." The corners of her mouth twitched. A smile, perhaps? "You are peculiar for a human." I approached slowly, keeping my movements deliberate and calm, just like approaching a frightened patient. "I'm Alex. And you are." My title would be unpronounceable in your language. The closest translation might be Lyra. "Alright, Lyra. I'm going to help you, but I need to touch your wound. Is that okay?" She hesitated before nodding. "If you must." The moment my fingers contacted her skin, everything changed. A jolt of energy surged through my body, not painful but overwhelming, like diving into the ocean after a lifetime in the desert. My vision blurred, replaced by flashes of unfamiliar skies, towering crystal spires, and beings moving with impossible grace. When clarity returned seconds later, I was still kneeling beside her, but something felt different. My hands tingled with newfound awareness, and somehow, I knew exactly what to do. "Your royalty," I whispered, the knowledge appearing in my mind without explanation. "You're running from something." Lyra's expression darkened. "How could you possibly know that?" I shook my head, equally confused. "I don't know. I just saw things when I touched you." Working with unexpected confidence, I applied pressure to her wound, watching in amazement as the silvery substance slowed its flow. Beneath my touch, her tissue began responding, knitting together in ways that defied medical science. "This shouldn't be possible," Lyra murmured, staring at my hands. No, it couldn't be." "What couldn't be?" I asked, continuing to work. "There are legends among my people," she said carefully, "of compatible beings across the cosmos. Souls whose energy signatures resonate at matching frequencies. We call them echo hearts. They're considered myths, stories to entertain children." I raised an eyebrow. "Are you saying we're some kind of cosmic soulmates?" "I'm saying your touch shouldn't heal me. It should burn like acid." Her gaze intensified. "Something about you is different, Alex. And that makes you either incredibly valuable or incredibly dangerous." As her wound continued healing under my care, a distant sound caught our attention, the unmistakable whir of helicopter blades. Someone else had noticed her crash landing. "They're coming," I said urgently. "Military, probably." Fear flashed across her features. "I cannot be discovered. My presence here would trigger complications." "Can you walk?" I asked, helping her sit upright. "Perhaps, with assistance." I made a split-second decision that would forever alter my existence. "My cabin's not far. We can hide there until you recover." As I helped Lyra to her feet, The strange connection between us pulsed stronger. What had begun as a chance encounter now felt like something written in the stars, a collision of worlds that would unveil secrets beyond my comprehension. The helicopter sounds grew louder as we disappeared into the treeline. Whatever awaited us, one thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same again. The forest seemed to close in around us as we stumbled through the underbrush. My cabin was less than a mile away, but with Lyra leaning heavily against me, it might as well have been 10. The helicopter searchlights swept through the trees behind us, casting long shadows that danced across our path. "They're getting closer," I muttered, adjusting my grip around Lyra's waist. Her skin hummed beneath my touch, like holding onto a gentle electric current. "Your government has been monitoring for my kind," she said between labored breaths. "They've detected our technology before." "Wait, there have been others like you here?" I asked, helping her over a fallen log. Lyra's expression grew guarded. "Observers. Scholars. We're not meant to interact directly with humans." My presence here was unplanned. The wind shifted, carrying with it the sound of voices and crackling radios. They were coordinating a search pattern. I pulled Lyra deeper into the shadows of a massive oak tree, pressing our backs against its rough bark. "What exactly are you running from?" I whispered as the voices grew temporarily distant. "You mentioned your royalty." She closed her eyes, seemingly weighing how much to reveal. "I am third heir to the celestial throne of Aloria. My sister, the first heir, was assassinated 3 lunar cycles ago. When an attempt was made on my life, I fled using an experimental ship." Her eyes opened, fixing me with that unsettling violet gaze. "I believe someone within our High Council is eliminating successors to seize power." "And you crashed here by accident?" "Not entirely. Your planet is considered a protected developing world, off-limits for direct contact. I calculated that my pursuers would hesitate to follow me here." The irony wasn't lost on me. An alien princess using Earth as a sanctuary because we were considered too primitive to bother with. Before I could respond, a beam of light cut through the darkness barely 20 feet from our hiding spot. "We need to move," I hissed, pulling her along as we crouched low through the undergrowth. The lights from my cabin finally appeared through the trees, a small 2-bedroom structure I'd inherited from my grandfather. Nothing fancy, but isolated enough that I could live in peace after my shifts. Now that isolation might save both our lives. Once inside, I quickly drew the blinds and helped Lyra to the couch. The silver substance had stopped leaking from her wound, but she looked pale, or whatever passed for paleness in her species. Her normally iridescent skin had dulled to a matte finish. "You need rest," I said, grabbing a blanket from the nearby chair. "And I need answers." "The connection between us," she said weakly. "It shouldn't exist. When you touched me, did you see anything else besides my home?" I hesitated, unsure how to describe the strange visions. I saw feelings more than images. Loneliness. Determination. I paused. "And I felt like I'd known you before, somehow." Lyra's eyes widened. "That confirms it. Somehow, you and I are echo hearts. In the ancient texts, it said that such pairs can share thoughts, emotions, even physical sensations across vast distances." "That sounds like something from a fantasy novel," I said skeptically. "And yet here I am, an alien princess in your living room," she countered with a hint of amusement. "The universe contains more mysteries than either of our species has unraveled." I walked to the window and carefully peered through the blinds. The helicopter had moved on, but I could see flashlight beams moving through the woods. They were conducting a ground search now. "If were these echo hearts," I said, turning back to her, "what does that mean exactly?" Lyra shifted uncomfortably. "According to legend, when echo hearts find each other, they become bound in ways neither can escape. Their life forces intertwine. If one dies..." She left the implication hanging. "Great," I muttered. "Cosmic soulmates with deadly consequences. Just what I needed on a Tuesday night." Despite her weakened state, Lyra laughed. A sound like wind chimes that seemed to bypass my ears and resonate directly in my mind. You humans and your remarkable ability to face the extraordinary with sarcasm. A sudden pounding at the door made us both freeze. Forest Service, a stern voice called out. We need to speak with the resident of this cabin. Lyra's eyes met mine, panic evident in their alien depths. I placed a finger to my lips, then pointed toward the small trapdoor in the kitchen floor, my grandfather's old root cellar. 1 minute. I called out, helping Lyra up as quietly as possible. Just getting dressed. As we crept toward the kitchen, I felt a strange warmth spreading from my hands where they touched her. The connection between us was growing stronger, and with it came flashes of knowledge that weren't my own. The layout of crystal palaces, the names of stars I'd never seen, and most disturbingly, the face of someone who looked remarkably like Lyra but with cold, calculating eyes. Who is that? I whispered as I opened the trapdoor. My cousin, Theron, she replied grimly. The one who I believe is behind the assassinations. And somehow, Alex, I think he's aware of you now too. The pounding at the door grew more insistent as I helped Lyra down into the darkness of the cellar. Whatever was happening between us was more than just a chance encounter. It was the beginning of something that would reach far beyond my small cabin, beyond Earth itself, into the stars, and I had a feeling we were both completely unprepared for what would come next. That I held my breath as footsteps creaked across the floorboards above us. The root cellar was barely 5 feet high, forcing us to crouch among the dusty shelves of canned goods and emergency supplies. Lyra's eyes glowed faintly in the darkness, tracking the movement overhead. They're searching the bedroom now, she whispered, though her lips didn't move. The connection between us was growing stronger by the hour. I could feel her thoughts brushing against mine like fingertips on skin. 3 days had passed since I'd brought her to the cabin. 3 days of hiding, of learning, of trying to understand what was happening between us. The wound on her abdomen had healed with remarkable speed under my care, leaving only a faint silver line as evidence. But the search parties hadn't given up. If anything, they'd intensified. They know I'm here, Lyra said, her mental voice tinged with guilt. They've detected energy signatures consistent with Elorian physiology. I nodded, having accepted days ago that my life had veered into territory no human had likely experienced before. What happens if they find you? I asked through our mental link, still awkward at communicating this way. Images flashed between us, sterile laboratories, surgical tools, examinations that seemed more like dissections. I winced at the clinical cruelty of it all. Your government would consider me the scientific discovery of the century, she replied. And my people would be forced to intervene to prevent your species from acquiring advanced technology before you're ready. It would be messy for both our worlds. The footsteps overhead finally retreated. A door slammed, followed by the sound of a vehicle starting up. I exhaled slowly, my shoulders dropping as tension released. We can't stay here, I said, climbing out of the cellar and helping Lyra up after me. They'll be back with more people, better equipment. Lyra moved to the window, peering cautiously through the blinds at the departing Forest Service truck. I need to contact my people, those loyal to my family. But any transmission I send might be intercepted by both your government and my enemies. I ran a hand through my hair, trying to think clearly despite the constant flow of alien emotions and memories now threading through my consciousness. What about your ship? Could we salvage anything from it? Possibly. The emergency beacon would still be intact. It's designed to resist damage and remain functional even after catastrophic failure. And it would signal only to your people? To my personal guard, yes. Those sworn to protect the royal bloodline. Lyra turned to face me, her expression grave. But returning to the crash site is dangerous. Your military has surely secured it by now. She was right. But over the past 3 days, something else had been happening, something neither of us fully understood. The connection between us had begun manifesting physically. When Lyra felt pain, I felt it too. When I was tired, she weakened. And most strangely, when we touched, I could somehow manipulate energy in ways that defied explanation. Show me again, I said, extending my hand. Lyra hesitated, then placed her palm against mine. The now familiar surge of energy flowed between us, building until a soft blue light emanated from where our skin met. Concentrating, I pulled some of that energy toward me, shaped it with my thoughts, and watched as it formed a small sphere of pulsing light above our joined hands. This ability, Lyra said, her voice filled with wonder, it's not in any of our records of echo hearts. You shouldn't be able to manipulate Alorian life energy. But I can, I said, allowing the sphere to dissipate. And if I can do this, maybe I can help you reach that beacon without being detected. Night fell as we prepared. I packed a small bag with essentials, food, water, first aid supplies. Lyra had fashioned a crude device from parts of my microwave and cell phone that she claimed would help mask her energy signature temporarily. I didn't ask how she knew to do that. The knowledge had simply appeared in my mind through our connection. Once we activate the beacon, she explained as we prepared to leave, events will accelerate quickly. My loyalists will come, but so might Theron's forces. And your military won't simply stand by. One problem at a time, I replied, though anxiety gnawed at my stomach. First, we get to the ship. We set out under the cover of darkness, moving through the forest like shadows. The crash site was approximately 4 miles northeast, and I knew these woods well enough to avoid the main trails where patrols might be waiting. What I wasn't prepared for was the growing sense of another presence watching us. A cold, calculating awareness that seemed to press against the edges of my consciousness. You feel it too, Lyra said, not a question but a statement. What is it? I asked, helping her over a rocky outcropping. Theron. Her mental voice was tight with fear. Somehow, he's found a way to reach across space, to sense me through our familial connection. Can he track us? Not precisely. But he knows I'm alive, and he knows I'm not alone. She gripped my arm suddenly. Alex, there's something I haven't told you. Something I didn't understand until tonight. I stopped, turning to face her in the pale moonlight filtering through the trees. What? Echo hearts aren't just a legend. They're a threat to people like Theron. When two compatible souls connect across species, it creates a type of power that can't be controlled by traditional means. That's why they're so rare. Those who would dominate others have hunted them to near extinction. The implications settled over me like a physical weight. So I'm not just a human who happened to help you. I'm a potential weapon, she finished. One that Theron will want eliminated before you fully understand what you are. Before I could respond, a bright light flooded the forest ahead. The unmistakable sound of helicopters grew louder, searchlights sweeping methodically across the trees. And behind us, something else, a high-pitched whine that raised the hair on my arms. That's not your military, Lyra whispered, her face draining of color. That's an Alorian scout ship. We were trapped between Earth forces ahead and alien pursuers behind. The crash site, and our only hope of contacting Lyra's allies, lay beyond the military checkpoint I could now see being established at the forest's edge. Worse, I could feel the cold presence in my mind growing stronger, more focused, as if someone were reaching through space itself to find us. He's coming, Lyra said, her voice trembling. Theron is actually coming himself. I grabbed her hand, the blue energy flaring between us more intensely than ever before. Then we better move fast. As we pressed forward, the energy connecting us began to change, growing hotter, more volatile. My skin tingled with power I didn't understand, while Lyra's eyes blazed with an inner light that illuminated the forest around us. Whatever we were becoming together was accelerating, transforming us both in ways neither human nor Alorian science had predicted, and somewhere among the stars, a being of immense power and cruelty was racing toward Earth, drawn by the unique signature of our joined energies, a tyrant who would destroy a world to prevent the rise of something he couldn't control that we had hours, at most, before worlds collided. And the only plan we had was desperate enough to get us both killed. The military checkpoint loomed ahead, a ring of floodlights and armed personnel surrounding what remained of Lyra's ship. We crouched behind a fallen tree, assessing our options. My heart hammered against my ribs as I counted at least 20 soldiers, along with what looked like a mobile research unit. white tents with shadowy figures moving between sophisticated equipment. "They've dismantled half the hull already," Lyra whispered, her mental voice tight with concern. "But the beacon is beneath the main console. They wouldn't have found it yet." I nodded, trying to think through our next move when a searing pain suddenly ripped through my skull. "Beside me," Lyra gasped, clutching her head. It felt like someone had driven an icicle straight through my brain, cold, sharp, and utterly invasive. "Scanning for us," Lyra managed between gritted teeth. "Theron has technology that can trace echo hearts." The pain intensified, bringing with it flashes of unfamiliar memories, a vast chamber with 3 thrones, a garden of crystalline flowers that sang in the wind, and a man with Lyra's violet eyes but none of her warmth, watching a holographic display of Earth with clinical interest. Then, as suddenly as it began, the pain vanished. In its place came clarity, not just my own thoughts, but something more. Knowledge that didn't belong to me filtered into my consciousness. "Lyra," I whispered, my voice strange to my own ears. "I know how to get us past them." She looked at me, confusion evident in her expression. "What do you mean?" I held up my hands, which now seemed to vibrate with barely contained energy. "The connection between us, it's not just sharing thoughts or feelings. I think I'm adapting, evolving. Your DNA and mine are somehow communicating on a cellular level." To demonstrate, I focused on that new well of knowledge, reaching for a specific ability I suddenly understood existed. A tingling sensation spread across my skin, and before Lyra's astonished eyes, my appearance began to shift. My skin took on the same iridescent quality as hers, the change spreading until I looked like a perfect male counterpart to her species. "That's..." Lyra's mental voice was breathless. "That's biomorphic resonance. Only the royal bloodline can initiate it, and even then, only with extensive training." I let the transformation fade, returning to my human appearance. "I don't think this is supposed to happen between echo hearts, is it?" "No." Her expression was troubled. "This is something else entirely. Something unprecedented." A new thought occurred to me, one that sent a chill through my body. "If I can access your abilities and you can access mine, then Theron might be able to exploit the connection to reach Earth in ways we never anticipated," she finished grimly, as if summoned by our realization. The night sky above us suddenly pulsed with an eerie violet light. The soldiers at the checkpoint looked up, weapons raised. A wind kicked up from nowhere, carrying with it the scent of ozone and something alien, like melting metal and exotic spices. "He's opening a portal," Lyra said, genuine fear lacing her voice. "Alex, this changes everything. I thought we had hours, but he's using the echo between us to tear through space-time itself." The violet light intensified, forming a circular distortion in the air above the crash site. The soldiers were shouting now, some backing away while others trained their weapons on the phenomenon. I watched in horrified fascination as the circle widened, revealing a window into another world, a cityscape of impossible architecture beneath a sky filled with 3 moons. "We have to get to that beacon now," I said, my decision made. "I'll create a diversion. You get to the ship." Before she could protest, I drew on our connection, pulling energy between us until my hands glowed with blue fire. Following instinct and borrowed knowledge, I directed that energy toward the trees on the far side of the clearing. The resulting explosion wasn't large, but it was spectacular, a burst of sapphire flames that immediately drew the attention of most of the soldiers as they rushed to investigate. Lyra and I slipped toward the ship from the opposite direction. We had almost reached it when a figure stepped out from behind the twisted metal. A woman in a lab coat, holding what looked like a tablet computer. Her eyes widened at the sight of us, but instead of raising an alarm, she quickly glanced around to ensure no one was watching. "Princess Lyra of Aloria," she said in a low, urgent voice. "I've been waiting for you." We froze. Lyra's grip on my arm tightened painfully. "How do you know who I am?" The woman's face remained carefully neutral, but I could see tension in her shoulders. "My name is Dr. Chin. I've been monitoring transmissions from your sector of space for 15 years. I know about the assassination attempts, the civil unrest on your world, and the tyrant who pursues you." She turned to me, her gaze assessing. "And you must be the Echo Heart, the first confirmed human compatible with Elorian energy signatures." "You're not with them?" I asked, nodding toward the soldiers still investigating the explosion. "I'm with a different division, one that believes first contact should be peaceful, not." She gestured to the military presence, "Whatever this is. But we don't have time for explanations." She handed Lyra a small device, sleek and obviously not of human manufacture. "This will amplify your beacon's signal tenfold. You'll need it if you want your loyalists to arrive before Theron fully materializes." Lyra took the device, suspicion clear in her expression. "Why would you help us?" Dr. Chen's professional demeanor cracked slightly, revealing something like desperation beneath. "Because there's something you don't know, Princess. Something about your connection with this human that changes everything." Above us, the portal grew larger, the air crackling with energy. From within it, a shape began to emerge, a vessel of some kind, sleek and predatory. "Theron isn't just coming to eliminate a rival for the throne," Dr. Chen continued urgently. "He's coming because your Echo Heart connection has triggered the Convergence Protocol, a failsafe built into your species' collective consciousness millennia ago." "What protocol?" Lyra demanded, even as she began moving toward the ship again. Dr. Chen's answer chilled me to the bone. "When a true Echo Heart bond forms, it signals that a species is ready for advancement, an evolutionary leap facilitated by compatible alien DNA. But those in power fear such advancement because it cannot be controlled." Her eyes fixed on me. "You're not just changing, Alex. You're becoming the catalyst for humanity's next evolution." The implications were staggering. No wonder Theron was willing to risk interplanetary incident to stop us. A shout from nearby indicated we'd been spotted. Dr. Chen pushed us toward the ship. "Go. I'll buy you time." As we raced for the beacon, the portal above fully opened. Theron's ship, a massive construct of gleaming metal and pulsing light, began its descent toward Earth. The air itself seemed to warp around it, reality bending in its presence. We reached the twisted hull of Lyra's crashed vessel just as the first shots rang out. Soldiers were converging on our position, while others fired uselessly at the alien ship materializing above. Dr. Chen had disappeared into the chaos. Lyra dropped to her knees beside a panel that had been pried loose, revealing a complex array of crystalline components beneath. "The beacon is still intact," she said, relief evident in her voice. As she worked to install Dr. Chen's amplifier, I stood guard, drawing more energy from our connection to create a shimmering barrier around us. Each bullet that struck it dissolved into harmless light. "Almost there," Lyra called, her fingers dancing across controls I couldn't begin to understand. The ground beneath us trembled as Theron's ship drew closer. Through our connection, I could feel his presence now, cold, calculating, and filled with a terrible purpose that extended far beyond mere political assassination. He wasn't just coming to kill Lyra. He was coming to prevent a future where humans and Elorians might share a destiny. "Alex," Lyra said, looking up from the beacon with an expression I couldn't quite read. "There's something else you need to know. Something I didn't tell you because I didn't understand it myself until now." The barrier around us flickered as my concentration wavered. "What?" "The reason our connection is so powerful, so unprecedented." She hesitated, then met my gaze directly. "It's because this isn't the first time our souls have found each other. We've been Echo Hearts before, across multiple lifetimes, multiple worlds." Before I could process this revelation, the beacon pulsed with brilliant light, shooting a beam of energy straight through Theron's descending ship and into the stars beyond. The signal was away, but whether help would arrive in time remained to be seen. Theron's ship stabilized directly above us, a hatch opening in its underside. The soldiers had stopped firing, many backing away in terror at the sight of the massive craft. Through that opening, I could make out a single figure preparing to descend. A tall, regal-looking man with Lyra's violet eyes and an expression of cold fury. Our time had run out. Whatever was coming next would determine not just our fate, but potentially the future of two worlds. Time seemed to slow as Theron descended from his ship, floating downward on a beam of violet light. Soldiers scattered in panic, some firing wildly at the alien craft while others fled into the forest. The ground trembled beneath my feet as Theron touched down, his regal cloak billowing around him despite the absence of wind. "My dear cousin," he called, his voice carrying effortlessly across the clearing. "Such trouble you've caused." Lyra stepped forward, her chin raised defiantly. "It's over, Theron. The beacon signal has been sent. My loyalists will be here soon." A cold smile crossed his face, so similar to Lyra's features yet devoid of her warmth. "Soon, but not soon enough." His gaze shifted to me, and I felt a pressure against my mind, like icy fingers probing for weakness. So this is the human who changed everything. Unremarkable apart from the echo. I stepped beside Lyra, my hand finding hers. Immediately, the energy between us flared, pushing back against Theron's mental intrusion. His eyes narrowed slightly, the first hint that something had surprised him. "You don't understand what you're interfering with," Lyra said. "The convergence is a natural process. Our ancestors built it into our genetic code for a reason." "Yes," Theron replied, taking a measured step forward. "A misguided reason. To ensure that power would always be shared, never concentrated." His lip curled in disgust. "The foolish idealism of our forebears. Why share divinity when one could claim it all?" Around us, the air crackled with competing energies, the blue light of our connection versus the violet haze emanating from Theron. In the sky above, his ship began emitting a low, pulsing tone that made my teeth ache and my vision blur. "He's activating a suppression field," Lyra's voice warned in my mind. "It will sever our connection if we don't act now." Acting on instinct, I focused on the energy flowing between us, mentally pulling it into a tight, concentrated ball. Lyra understood immediately, adding her power to mine until the blue light intensified, becoming almost white-hot between our clasped hands. Theron raised his arm, a sleek device materializing from beneath his sleeve. "Enough of this. The convergence will not happen today, or ever. Your echo-heart bond will be broken, and the evolutionary catalyst will die with it." He fired the weapon just as we released our gathered energy. The two forces collided in midair with a thunderous crack that sent shockwaves across the clearing. Trees bent backward, debris flew in all directions, and a blinding flash temporarily obscured everything. When my vision cleared, Theron stood unharmed, though his expression had changed from confidence to something closer to concern. The energy we'd released had neutralized his weapon's blast but hadn't stopped him. "Impressive," he conceded. "The bond between you is stronger than anticipated, but ultimately futile." He raised both hands this time, and the violet energy around him expanded outward like a wave. As it approached, I felt our connection beginning to strain, the blue light between Lyra and me flickering uncertainly. "Alex," Lyra's voice was urgent in my mind. "Remember what Dr. Chen said, what we are together is more than just echo hearts. If we've found each other across lifetimes, there must be a reason." Understanding dawned on me with sudden clarity. We'd been fighting defensively, trying to maintain our connection against Theron's attacks. But the true power of echo hearts wasn't in defense, it was in creation. "Trust me," I whispered, squeezing her hand, and I closed my eyes, focusing not on the energy between us but on the memories we'd shared, both in this lifetime and, somehow, beyond. Images flickered through my consciousness. Lyra and I in different forms, different worlds, always finding each other across impossible distances. With each memory, our connection deepened, not just between our minds but between our very selves. The blue light spread, no longer just surrounding our joined hands but enveloping our entire bodies. I felt a strange sensation, as if my physical form was becoming less substantial, merging with Lyra's in a way that transcended mere touch. Theron's violet wave hit us, but instead of breaking our connection, it passed through harmlessly, like water flowing around stone. "Impossible," Theron hissed, genuine fear flashing across his face for the first time. The transformation accelerated. Lyra and I were no longer simply standing side by side. We were becoming something new, something neither human nor Elorian but a perfect synthesis of both. Our physical forms blurred, the blue light intensifying until it was almost blinding. The convergence cannot be stopped. Our voices spoke in unison, the sound resonating with harmonic overtones that made the very air vibrate. It was never about one species or one world. It was about all worlds, all species, finding their way to each other. Theron backed away, his composure cracking. This wasn't supposed to happen. The legends never spoke of physical merger. Because it has never happened before, we replied. We are the first to complete the cycle, to find each other enough times across enough lives to achieve true union. With a desperate snarl, Theron raised his hands again, channeling all his power into one massive strike. The violet energy lanced toward us like lightning, deadly, focused, and unstoppable, except that it wasn't. Our merged forms simply absorbed the attack. The violet energy converted to blue as it joined our growing power. Theron stumbled backward, his face a mask of disbelief and rage. You cannot stop what has already begun, we told him, our voice gentle despite the immense power now flowing through us. The convergence is not just for Earth and Aloria. It's for all worlds ready to take the next step. We raised a hand, and the blue light expanded outward in a perfect sphere, encompassing the clearing, the forest, and eventually the entire region in its glow. Where it touched, it left understanding in its wake, not fear or confusion, but clarity. The soldiers who had been fleeing or fighting suddenly stopped, looking up at the sky with expressions of wonder rather than terror. Above us, the stars seemed to brighten, as if responding to our call. And from among them came new lights, ships of various designs, some clearly Alorian, others unfamiliar even to Lyra's memories. The Council, Theron whispered, his shoulders slumping in defeat. They've come. Not just the Council, we corrected. Representatives from 12 worlds, all with their own echo hearts, all waiting for this moment. The beginning of the galactic convergence. The first ship to land was smaller than Theron's but more elegant, its design suggesting function over intimidation. From it emerged 3 figures in flowing robes, their features similar to Lyra's but with subtle variations that hinted at different bloodlines. High Council, Theron said, attempting to regain his composure. This human and the princess have violated our most sacred laws. They've initiated a premature convergence that threatens the stability of silence, commanded the central figure, a tall woman with silver-streaked hair and eyes that held the wisdom of centuries. You speak of laws, Theron, yet you pursued your cousin across forbidden space, attempted assassination of 2 royal heirs, and sought to prevent the very evolution our ancestors designed us to facilitate. She turned toward us, her expression softening. Princess Lyra, and you, human Echoheart, what you have accomplished is unprecedented, but not unexpected. The records of the first convergence spoke of a time when 2 souls would find each other so persistently across the cosmos that they would transcend their separate forms. The blue light surrounding us began to pulse in time with our heartbeats, now synchronized into a single rhythm. What happens now? We asked. Now, she replied, you make a choice. You can remain in this merged state, becoming the catalyst that accelerates the convergence between all 12 worlds. Or you can separate, returning to your individual forms but maintaining the bond between you. Either path will lead to the same destination, though at different speeds. The enormity of the decision washed over us. To remain as we were meant, becoming something beyond Huma. Or Alorian, a new form of consciousness that would help guide multiple species toward a shared evolution. To separate meant returning to our individual lives but with a connection that would never be broken, serving as ambassadors between our worlds. We turned our attention inward, to the place where Alex and Lyra's consciousnesses overlapped. What do you want? I asked the part that was still distinctly Lyra. To know you in all ways, came her response. As separate beings and as one. To have both experiences. Understanding flowed between us. With a shared thought, we began to disentangle our merged form, the blue light gradually separating into 2 distinct but still connected figures. The process was neither painful nor difficult, simply a shifting of energy back into its original containers, yet forever changed by the experience as we fully separated, I found myself standing once more as a human man, and Lyra as an Elorian princess. But the connection between us remained, a subtle blue thread visibly linking our hearts. Theron had been taken into custody by the council guards, his protests falling on unsympathetic ears. Dr. Chen had somehow reappeared and was deep in conversation with representatives from several alien species, her scientific curiosity evidently overcoming any fear. "We made the right choice," Lyra said, squeezing my hand. "This way, we can experience the joy of finding each other anew each day, rather than existing as a single consciousness. Besides," I added with a smile, "someone has to explain to humanity why the sky is suddenly full of alien ships." The silver-haired counselor approached us again. "The convergence has begun, but it will proceed gradually now. Your worlds will have time to adjust, to learn from each other." She turned to me specifically. "You should know, Alex, that you are not the only human echo heart. There are others, scattered across your planet, who have the potential for connection with different species. They will begin to manifest now that you have opened the way." This revelation sent a thrill of excitement through me. "So Earth was ready all along?" "More than ready," she confirmed. "Your kind has been reaching for the stars since you first looked up at the night sky. Now the stars have reached back." As dawn broke over the forest, more ships descended, not with the threatening presence of Theron's vessel but with the careful precision of welcomed guests. The military had formed a perimeter but was no longer acting with hostility, many of the soldiers seemingly affected by the wave of understanding we had released. Lyra leaned against me, her head resting on my shoulder as we watched this historic moment unfold. "So," she said with a hint of mischief in her voice, "still think helping that wounded alien in the forest was a bad idea?" I laughed, wrapping an arm around her waist. "Definitely the best-worst decision I've ever made." What neither of us noticed, as we stood watching the beginning of a new era for both our worlds, was the faint shimmer of blue energy still surrounding us, not separating as completely as we'd thought. And deep within that energy, something new was forming. Something neither human nor Elorian, but a perfect blending of both. The convergence had indeed begun, but in ways that even the ancient architects of our meeting across lifetimes could never have foreseen. Our journey was just beginning. 3 months passed in a whirlwind of change. The day Theron descended from the sky, now called First Contact Day across both Earth and Eloria, had transformed our world forever. Humanity had taken the news of alien life with surprising adaptability, though not without its share of panic, resistance, and wonder. I stood on the porch of my cabin, now expanded and retrofitted with a curious blend of human and Elorian technology. The forest around us had been designated as a diplomatic zone, neutral ground where representatives from Earth and the 12 worlds of the convergence could meet without the complications of urban centers or military installations. Lyra emerged from inside, carrying 2 steaming mugs. She'd taken to certain human customs with enthusiasm, particularly hot chocolate on cool autumn evenings. "The council session ended early," she said, handing me a mug before settling beside me on the porch swing. "They've finally agreed on the educational exchange program. 100 human students will begin studying on Eloria next month, with an equal number of Elorians coming to Earth." I sipped the chocolate, smiling at how ordinary such extraordinary news had become. And Theron? Stripped of rank and confined to the rehabilitation colony on Nyx. The tribunal was unanimous. He'll have no contact with any worlds participating in the convergence for at least a century. The sentence seemed both harsh and lenient to my human perspective. Harsh in its duration, lenient in that he still lived despite his crimes. But I'd learned that Elorians viewed justice differently, focusing on reformation rather than punishment. "And what about us?" I asked, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. "Has the council made a decision?" Lyra's expression softened as she leaned against me. The blue thread connecting our hearts had become visible to others in recent weeks, a sign that whatever had begun during our merger was continuing to develop. "They want to study us, of course. We're the first Echo Hearts to achieve partial merger and survive. But they've agreed to our terms, no separation, no invasive testing." I nodded, relieved. The weeks following first contact had been a blur of debriefings, medical examinations, and diplomatic meetings. Dr. Chen had emerged as humanity's unexpected champion, her 15 years of secret research proving invaluable in establishing protocols for human-alien interaction. She now headed the newly formed Convergence Research Division at the UN. And the others? I asked. Have they found any more human echo hearts? 7 confirmed so far, Lyra replied. Each linked to a different species within the Convergence. None have achieved our level of connection yet, but they're showing promising signs. The Tellurian linked with that doctor in Mumbai is particularly interesting. They're developing a shared empathic field that extends to others around them. A comfortable silence fell between us as we watched the first stars appear in the deepening twilight. So much had changed, yet moments like this remained precious in their simplicity. I've been thinking, I said finally, about what the High Counselor told us. About finding each other across lifetimes. Lyra's fingers intertwined with mine, a gentle current of energy flowing between us at the contact. What about it? If we've been searching for each other throughout time and space, always finding a way back together, what happens now that we've found each other for good? What's our purpose? She considered this, her violet eyes reflecting the emerging stars. Perhaps finding each other was never the end goal, just the beginning. The ancient texts speak of echo hearts as bridges between worlds, catalysts for change. Change that's definitely happening, I noted. The news that morning had reported the first successful humanolorian medical procedure, a synthesis of technologies that had cured a previously terminal illness. Similar breakthroughs were occurring weekly across everything from agriculture to quantum physics. But I think there's more to it than just facilitating technological exchange, Lyra continued. Last night I dreamed of us, not as we are now, but as we were when merged. In the dream, we were showing others how to achieve the same connection. I nodded slowly. I had the same dream. Do you think it's a shared vision? The Council would say it's the convergence guiding us toward our purpose. I smiled, pulling her closer. And what would you say? I'd say it's us guiding ourselves. The memories we share across lifetimes, the knowledge we've gathered, it's all there, waiting for us to access it. She touched the center of my chest, where the blue thread originated. Whatever's growing between us now is just the next step in a journey we've been on for longer than either of us can remember. As if responding to her touch, a soft pulse of energy rippled along our connection, bringing with it a flash of shared sensation, the feeling of flying among stars, of breathing underwater, of existing in forms neither of us currently wore. Brief glimpses of past lives, or perhaps future ones. We should probably tell the Council about that, I said when the vision faded. Lyra's expression turned mischievous. Tomorrow. Tonight is just for us. In the distance, lights rose from the diplomatic complex as another alien delegation arrived. Earth was becoming a crossroads for the convergence, a meeting place for species that had previously known of each other only through ancient records and astronomical observations. Everything had changed, yet the most important thing remained constant. The connection between us, a bridge between worlds that had somehow survived across time and space to bring two species together when they needed each other most. As night fell fully around us, we sat watching the stars, many of which I now knew held worlds with their own stories, their own echo hearts, their own paths to the convergence. The universe suddenly seemed both vastly larger and infinitely more connected than I'd ever imagined. What do you think happens next? I asked, my voice soft in the darkness. Lyra's answer came not in words but in a gentle flow of images through our connection. A future unfolding with endless possibilities, adventures among the stars, civilizations rising together rather than separately, and through it all, the two of us, sometimes separate, sometimes merged, but always connected. It was enough. More than enough. It was everything. The wounded alien princess and the human who saved her had found their purpose at last, not in endings, but in new beginnings. And somewhere in the vast cosmos, other echo hearts were awakening, ready to bridge new worlds just as we had done. Our story wasn't over. In many ways, it was just beginning.